Well, let's see if we can't get these airbags fixed for the AMX. I think these are the necessary tools I'll need for trying to get this done. So I'll just kind of do everything step by step and record when I get to the next spot. So I don't ever say that there's a wrong way to do stuff, but I've been told 3 wraps, 5 wraps, Teflon tape on something you're trying to use Teflon tape on. To tell you the truth, I just wrap it until it feels right. And that's kind of how I've done it. A little trick I always use is always point the threads at myself and clockwise. Always wrap your spool clockwise so you're going the right direction. But if you're pointing it away from you, basically it'd be counterclockwise. But just a couple tips on what I know on using Teflon tape. And on the top of this thing, I got some new E-clips. So, got in a fight with the rear tire. Which one do you think won? So this is just 1/4 inch plastic tubing. I use it a lot in my line of work, so lucky for me, I have a bunch of it. This is just 1/4 inch air fitting tubing, quick release style. So when you put your tube in, you just push that little thing down and pull on it, and then the tube will pop back out. So it's got kind of like a insert already kind of in there, but the fittings I use a lot are called John Geiss fittings. I guess these are just quick release air fittings. I don't know what the brand would be on them, but get some lights set up under the AMX and see if we can't get that all put in there. I've got to figure out something to do about lighting. This garage is super ill-equipped for lighting, but I don't own this place, and people that do get real excited if you do any kind of modifications to anything. So I haven't done anything to try to make lighting better. I am, however, in the process of trying to buy some property and just get a shop built. That'd be really cool. Well, I'm gonna have to fiddle with this a minute, so bring you back here in a minute. Well, I was smart enough to leave a little chunk of that line in there so a bunch of mud and crud didn't get in it, but probably not going to be real fun to get out of there. I doubt I'll be able to do it with one hand, but well, let me get a wrench and just do it right. So it goes on like that, and then a pinch. You can use a just like a wrench and stick over that and pull it right off. But should work pretty good. Well, that's what it's supposed to look like. And if this all line rubs a hole in it itself. Easy enough to replace and fix. Alright, gotta get a little air in it to get the top up in there. Alright, well, it's all in there. So, a little air to it. And I keep about 5 psi of air. So, maybe 7 psi, but 5 psi is where I like to keep it at. Let's say I'm missing a nut on that bracket down there. Well, we'll get her figured out. Well, I already know I kind of made an introduction video about the AMX and all that good stuff. But I've had a few more people ask me, what is the real story on this car? You know, how did you find it? Well, this particular car goes way back further than just finding it sitting in the field. My family and I moved up from South Carolina to Montana here, well, back when I was 6 or 7 years old, so back in 96, 97, something like that. And we lived up out of Derry, south of town, and you know, the closest town I we lived by was Bozeman, and then there was always Belgrade. And my dad and I used to go to Belgrade quite a bit and get supplies and whatnot. And on the way between where we lived, Bozeman and Belgrade, there was a road, 2-lane road that would take you there. And on the side of the road, kind of in an old ranch farm type of setup, and there was this orange car with a white stripe going down it, always just sitting right there on the side of the roads behind a fence. And I was only probably 9 years old at the time when I first started noticing this car, and I remember asking my dad, hey, can we stop? We should look at that car. And that's a really neat car. What is that? You know, and my dad thought it was a Javelin or something, which, you know, was fair to say. That's what everybody thinks this car is a Javelin. But you know, he just wasn't around AMCs back when he was younger, and where he lived there just wasn't a whole lot of them, so he wasn't 100% sure on what it was. But so I kind of fell in love with the car, and for years it just sat there on the side of the road, complete, everything, glass, hood, just a complete car just sitting there. Well, in 2001, I was about ready to go to high school, and my parents, we moved to closer to Billings, Montana, moved away. And Bozeman is pretty big, and it's growing fast. One of the fastest growing cities in America right now. And we were over in the Billings area until about 2006, and then I went to Phoenix for a couple of years and did some schooling and learning and stuff down there, and came back to Billings around 2000, late 2007. And my dad had bought a shop in Belgrade, Montana, and, you know, so I kind of followed him back to the Bozeman area. And when I got back, I said, I wonder where that car, what's up with that car now, since I'm a little bit smarter and have a little bit of money. And sure enough, that 2-lane road is now a major 4-lane road, and that ranch kind of farmhouse area, that didn't exist anymore, and the car definitely wasn't there either. I asked around for about a year, and just random people, and asked them if they remember that orange AMX sitting on the side of the road, and a lot of people do remember it and say, yeah, I remember that car, but I don't know what happened to it. Well, I was talking to some people one day and brought it up to them. They go, yeah, I know who bought that car. They bought that car back in 2002, 2003. They ran and drove. So kind of an odd guy. He bought it and he pulled the hood off of it right away and put a big giant carburetor on it and drove it around briefly without a hood. And he lived somewhere in the Four Corners area, and that's just a little kind of industrial area between Bozeman and Belgrade now. I used to have a kind of a trailer park and stuff out there, but now it's just Four Corners. There's a gas station literally on all corners, and each way you take the road takes you to a different part of the state, really. That's why they call it Four Corners. But so I asked around some places in Four Corners, never turned up any names, never turned anything up with the car. So, and that was probably 2009 when I figured out somebody had actually bought the car and drove it around. Well, about 2 more years passed by. I guess I'd say 3 more years passed by, and then the job I'm currently working at now, I started working for them back in 2011. Part of my job was driving around in these back areas of towns and stuff and doing my work, and happened to be driving down some particular back dirt roads north of Belgrade, kind of towards the foothills of the mountains. And you know, I drove that road a few times, and I always noticed there was a few cars out in the field, and not too far off the road, and never thought much of it. Well, some of the cars started disappearing, and as they disappeared, more cars kind of could be seen that were hidden behind the previous cars. And I noticed there was a couple of Javelins sitting out there, and I thought, huh, I should maybe stop and ask them about the Javelins, because that'd be kind of neat. Well, I pulled into the guy's driveway, and out at the corner of my eye, I looked behind the Javelins, and I could see a remnants of an orange car, just the roof. And just kind of got a gut feeling that I wonder if that orange car is probably something special, you know. And an elderly man came out and talked to me a little bit, and he said, yeah, go have a look at the cars. None of them are mine. I'm just kind of storing them here for a relative, so feel free to go look and do whatever you want. And so I immediately went out there, and sure enough, I noticed the orange AMX, the distinctive faded orange with the white stripe. It was barely could be seen on this car, and all it was a shell. Just a shell with nothing. As I mentioned in my previous introduction video, it had nothing. The little bit of parts that were laying around the car were just scattered like a bomb went off. And the 390 sat there with nothing. Just, it's been sitting there for a long time. And so the story to that guy was, as well, his brother bought this car, and he lived in Four Corners. And he admitted to his brother was a little differenty, and the first thing he did was kind of pull the car apart a little bit, and it was a fully running, driving 390 car. And he pulled the seats out of it, and he pulled the hood off of it, and then he just didn't do anything else with the car. Well, then another relative bought the car from him and dragged it to that field where it has been sitting since, and left it in that field, and took it upon himself that he was going to restore the car, and took it apart in pieces just in that field. Just took it all apart and left it there. Well, throughout the years, random stuff just became missing out of the random piles of stuff, and pretty much by the time I found it, it was already picked well over, and parts were just gone and not with the car anymore. So I asked him who owned the car now, and he said, well, another relative, but he really doubts he would sell the car because he's going to restore it, quote unquote. So at that point, just nothing kind of went through. The 2 Javelins that were out there with this car were kind of owned by the same guy that had this car. You know, nothing really came of it, but I did become friends with the gentleman that this car was sitting in his field, because he does have a really nice 1970 Javelin that he bought brand new with the 394 speed in 1970. He had it ordered from Butte, Montana at the AMC dealership, and he's had it ever since. Really nice car. So I talked to him. here and there throughout the years, and bought a few other AMCs, and would bring them out to him, and I would just BS about them and have a good time, talk about different mods and different things to do. And anyways, a few years went by, and he finally said, you know, that AMX is just going to waste. Here's his number. Why don't you call him and see what you can do? And this was in 2000, I want to say 2014, 15, somewhere at that time when I finally got the number to call this guy. Called him up immediately, talked to him about the car, and it was a pretty brief conversation. And it was, nope, don't want to sell the Javelins. Nope, I don't want to sell the AMX. I'm going to restore that. And that was really the end of the conversation. Nothing else happened. So kind of discouraged. I just didn't do anything else with the car, and so I had a 73 AMX Javelin, Prairie Carton, 4-speed, 401, Crowell hood, all the good stuff, and that's kind of what I was fixing and driving, and you know, was my car, what I wanted, and couldn't have the AMX. I had to settle for that. Well, the guy called me up about 6 months later and told me, I'll take $2,500 for that AMX. I have a title for it. I didn't have $2,500 at that time, but I put my 73 AMX Javelin, which was pretty much completely done other than paint, up for sale immediately. That car sold in 30 minutes for well over $2,500, but it was my pride and joy at that time. I called him up 2 days later and said, okay, I got your money. And as you would imagine, he changed his mind. He changed his mind so much in the fact that he came and loaded up what was left of the shell on a trailer and hauled it off to somewhere I didn't know. So that was 2014, 15, somewhere in that time. I was really discouraged at that point. Just sold my pride and joy car. I wasn't going to back out of the deal with that guy over this, so really kind of just got out of AMCs there for a while. Just didn't even mess with them anymore. Had no interest in them. Just really put a bad taste in my mouth over that whole deal. So if we keep going to 2018, early year of 18. Well, maybe late year of 17. It was still winter time. I actually did some work for a guy in Bozeman, and I told him the same story about this car because he was kind of a car guy and asked me, how come I don't have a car? And I told him who the guy was, and he just laughs. He says, I know that guy. His kid works with me all the time. I know that guy. They're not going to restore that car. That car is just rotting. He goes, I know exactly where that car's sitting. Because it's sitting under some concrete blankets next to their slaughterhouse where they process wild game. He goes, they're not going to do nothing with that car. He goes, I'll make a phone call and I'll get that car. That car's not going to do nothing. Very confident in his response that he was going to get this car. So I didn't really think too much about it. I just said, okay, well, sure. Let me know. Well, he called me a week later. And he told me, okay, they're ready to sell that car. You call them up and you offer them $1,800, nothing more for that car. And don't tell them who you are, don't tell them anything, just here's their number, call them up. So I called him up the very next day, talked to him. I talked to his son, not the original guy. And I told him, can I come up immediately this afternoon and look at it? Well, sure, yeah, no problem. I got the directions. It's kind of up in the mountains, like way up in the mountains with no cell service or anything. I get clear up there, and he points out there to a lump in the ground. He said, well, the car is under there. Feel free to go have a look at it, you know. And sure enough, it was under concrete blankets and under about 3 feet of snow. I pulled it off, confirmed it was the car. Well, I pulled the concrete blanket far enough to confirm it was the car. Asked the kid, do you have any other parts for it? He said, well, I got a few odds and bits for it. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I said, what do you take for the car? He goes, well, I need to get $2,500 for it. I told him, I told him, I'll give you $1,800 cash money right now for the car if you got a title. He thought about it. He said, okay, that's fair enough. Handed him the $1,800. He brought me out a title, and I signed my name on that title faster than you've probably ever seen anybody sign a name on anything, because they're not going to back out of this deal again. Told him I'd be back up the next day to get the car. He said, well, it's supposed to snow, you should probably wait. I said, no, I'll be up here tomorrow to get the car. We loaded up what little bit of stuff he had in my truck that day. The next day it did snow quite a bit. I went up there in a truck, got stuck 2 or 3 times with the trailer, got to this car, dug it out, hooked it to the trailer, dragged it on the trailer, and left before that guy even showed back up. Because you won't imagine what happened next. I get home a day later, he's calling me up screaming. My dad is pissed that I sold that car. I need that car back right now. And, well, I'm not going to lie to you, I had no sympathy for them. They were going to let this car rot away to nothing further. So I just told them, well, I can't help you. I already signed a title. I've already paid you cash money. The deal's done. That's just how it is. So, and that's how this car came to be. So, like I said, we've had this car right around 2 years now, and there are a few pictures of it floating around on Instagram where you can see kind of what it was. And I know this is kind of a long rambling of me just talking about the car, but that should explain the full story on the AMX to you. So the rest is history. If you've been following me on Instagram, then you kind of already know what's happened to the car since I've owned it, had it in my possession. Some people agree with it, some people don't, but it's better than it sitting under concrete tarps or in a field just rotting away. Well, I hope you enjoyed this rambling. Until next time, I guess we'll see you next time.